Hello and thanks for joining us today on City Talk. I'm Maria Sorreo. I'm here at Trump National, joined by City Council member Brian Campbell. Brian, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Maria.
Now, Brian, usually we're talking about political and city issues with you, but today it's really just about you. We want to get to know you a little bit better. I know that you didn't grow up in California. You were born in Ohio and grew up in Colorado. Is that right?
That's correct.
Let's start there then.
Okay.
Okay.
I was born in Toledo, Ohio, but as a very young boy moved to Colorado. My dad worked for a company called Ball Corporation.
Yes.
And he was a patent attorney with their aerospace division. So we were fortunate enough as children to be moved to Boulder, Colorado, and that's where we grew up.
What was it like in Boulder? I know that a lot of people love living in that area.
When we moved there, it was a very small town. It was maybe 25,000 people.
Sure.
And the University of Colorado was probably 15,000 of that. So it was very much a university town. So I grew up with that great positive experience of having so much creativity in education and an outdoor environment and hiking, and it was a terrific place to grow up for myself and my brothers and sister.
I was going to ask you that. I know you have siblings. Tell us about them.
Got an older sister. She's the oldest.
She's the boss, right?
She was the boss.
Okay.
She was 8 years older than me, so
Okay.
I very much looked up to her and very much obeyed her.
Okay.
And
You're a good brother.
And I've got an older brother that's 3 years older than me. He
All right.
lives in Arizona. My sister lives in Mexico now.
Okay.
And then my younger brother lives in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Wow.
He's about 2 years younger than me.
He stayed closer to home.
He did.
And your parents are still in Colorado, is that right?
My parents are still in Colorado. They're both in their mid-80s. My dad was a World War II veteran, and he met my mom immediately after the war, and here I am.
Fell in love, that was it.
Right.
Now, your mom has an interesting story, because I know that she fought for women's rights. She was part Cherokee Indian, is that right?
My mom's 1/4 Cherokee. I'm
Okay.
1/8 Cherokee
Okay.
Indian. And when she was growing up in Virginia, back
Right.
during the Great Depression, there was not nearly the tolerance or colorblindness that we have now in our society.
Right.
And so my mom, as a very young girl, found herself getting shuttled around from relative to relative who didn't really want her. And there was a lot of discrimination against her. I mean, that sounds startling in this day and age.
Right.
But that's the environment that she lived in rural Virginia in the 1930s.
Wow.
So at 13 years old, she left home. She struck out on her own and traveled across the country by train. Back in those days, it took 3 days, and she ended up in San Diego working at the United States Naval Base down there pre-World War II.
Now, is that where she met your dad?
No, she met my dad back in Ohio immediately after the war.
All right, because I know your dad was in the military, and you were as well, is that right? Your whole family?
Almost every generation that we've been able to track back has got people that served in the military. I mean, I've got a great-grandfather that was in the Spanish-American War. My grandfather fought in World War I. My father fought in World War II. My older brother served in Vietnam in the Marines. I served in the U.S. Army and was stationed overseas inside the demilitarized zone with North Korea in the late 1970s. So, interestingly, nobody's ever made a career of the military.
Right.
We've always been citizen soldiers, volunteers, went in, did our duty, and then went back to civilian life and lived our lives.
Now, after college, you became a businessman, is that right? Is that?
After college, I volunteered for the Army. I was in a 2-year ROTC program at the University of Colorado, where I graduated from.
Right.
But when I graduated, I was not obligated to go active duty with the military. But at that point, I made the decision that I thought I could probably do the most good and perhaps work on things that were more important to me and what I thought the country needed at the time. And so I volunteered to go active duty. And
Is that something you always wanted to do, no matter what you were going to get into as a career?
I'd always been interested in it, probably partly because of just growing up in that environment where my family was always involved in some respect, either in volunteering in the community or volunteering for military service in time of need.
Right.
I mean, my mom fought her whole life
Yes,
for
she
better
did.
rights for women and minorities. So I grew up in a family where every day we talked about this sort of thing. Every day we talked about the injustices that not so much she went through. My mother's a private person, but she was always very concerned about other people and making sure that they didn't have to go through the sort of experiences that she did.
Yeah. Now, was she a stay-at-home mom? She was.
At various times she was. I mean, when we were really growing up, she was. But then she became a businesswoman and was a very successful jeweler and owned her own company. And she was an artist and she's a lifelong learner. She actually graduated from college when she was in her 60s.
What an amazing accomplishment that is. Everyone says they're going to go back, but your mom actually really did.
My mom actually does it.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
And so, even today, I mean, she studies, she reads, she's active in the community. I mean, I really respect the energy and the effort and the passion that my mom's got.
Sure.
As well as my dad.
Yeah. So how did you get from that life to California?
Once I finished my active duty in the military, I took a job which just coincidentally was in Houston, Texas. And I lived in Houston for 8 years, was in the commercial real estate business. But after a number of years, I started realizing that when I was a kid growing up in Colorado, I was always fascinated with California.
Really? Why? Why was that?
Because I saw California as having everything Colorado had, with the mountains and the outdoorsiness, I guess, to use that word,
right?
But more
with the beautiful ocean. Yeah, exactly.
We've got the ocean in Catalina,
yes,
out there, and so I always saw Southern California as being the epitome of the place to live.
Now, when was the first time you ever visited California?
I visited California briefly, probably when I was on a driving trip with some friends in college. But when I lived in Houston, Texas, a number of us, we played volleyball. And I still play beach volleyball every other week down in Redondo Beach. And we used to come out here on vacation to play volleyball. And one day on the beach, it was just an epiphany where I was standing there, and it was a beautiful day like this, and I was looking up at a tall white building up the coast in Santa Monica. It's called the 100 Wilshire building. And Cesar Pelli, the famous architect, actually designed that. And I was looking at that building, and I thought, I wonder who the commercial office leasing agent is for that building, because I'd like to be that guy.
So you were tying it in.
I was tying it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I thought, why should I keep coming out here for vacation when I'm single? I can come out here and do it now. And I decided that afternoon that I was going to move to California, and I was going to become the leasing agent for that building, the 100 Wilshire building.
And were you?
About a year and a half later, I was.
Wow, that's quite an accomplishment.
So that's kind of a funny little story about how I got started.
Well, you know, what's really interesting to me about people that move here from other places. I was born and raised in California, but everyone always has such an interesting story. Either they really wanted to come here, or they came here once and just saw it and said, this is it, I love it here, and here you are. Now, did you move to Palos Verdes when you first came, or did you live somewhere else?
No, I lived down in Redondo Beach. I just rented an apartment. I mean, this was 23 years ago.
Okay.
And from there, I moved up to West LA, close to UCLA, and I lived there for, gosh, probably about 10 years or so.
Okay.
And then when I met my wife, Susie, that's when she and I both moved down to Palos Verdes about 12 and a half years ago.
Now, how did you two meet?
We met in Santa Monica at what was supposed to be a girls' night out.
Oh, how did you get involved, Brian?
She organized a girls' night out with about 8 of her friends.
Okay.
And I was friends with one of her friends who I saw at the gym that Friday afternoon. And she goes, hey, Brian, are you dating anybody right now? And I said, not right now. And she goes, well, why don't you come out? I'm getting together with a few of my friends for dinner. She didn't realize it was supposed to be just the girls. So I showed up at this girls' night out. I was the only guy, and so I kind of crashed the party, but that's where I met her.
So it must have worked out okay then.
I think it worked out okay.